India has taken over the G20 presidency, and over the next 9 months, 200 meetings are planned across 55 Indian cities. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has said that One Earth, One Family, One Future will be India's guiding principle during the G20 presidency. Laying out India's priorities, the PM said that challenges like climate change, terrorism and pandemics cannot be resolved by fighting. He added that India will focus on sustainable and environment-friendly lifestyles and depoliticization of supply chains of food, fertilizer and energy. Sources have said that India will like to act as a bridge so that G20 members can tackle issues related to economic growth, indebtedness and reviving momentum on sustainable development goals. Joining me now to take this discussion forward, we are joined by Usha Rao-Monari, Associate Administrator at the UNDP, Ugo Astuto, European Union Ambassador to India, Philipp Ackermann, German Ambassador to India, and Vincenzo di Luca, Italian Ambassador to India. Thank you very much for joining us here on Global Eye. Ambassador Astuto, what would be European Union's priorities during the G20? What would be your expectation from India?
Well, look, the G20 is a strong pillar of multilateral cooperation. And we, as European Union, we are fully committed to the success of the G20 process. The G20 process is key for addressing existing and emerging global challenges. Challenges which have intensified following COVID and then following the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine. So we need to ensure that multilateralism works also in times of crisis. And I think that India's leadership will be instrumental in taking the G20 agenda forward. India is a very influential player and is in a good position to shape the agenda for the global common goods. In order to address challenges such as climate change, biodiversity loss, fight against possible future pandemics, the achievement of sustainable development goals, a human-centric digital transition. But quite a number of global challenges where the G20 can play a role and where there are high expectations from the Indian presidency. And I'm pretty sure that these expectations will be met.
Right. So high expectations from the India presidency of the G20. Ambassador Philipp, to get you in at this stage, the Russia-Ukraine war has disrupted global supply chains. The impact on energy supply chains is being felt across Europe and in Germany as well very strongly. What would be your expectation in terms of India helping in mitigating the impact, the economic impact of the Ukraine-Russia war?
Well, I would say that my government is very open, or my country is very open to any debate on the resilience of supply chains. I think what we have seen is that dependence on one provider is not a good thing. We have learned that the hard way, I would say, and we need, after COVID and after the Russian war of aggression, we need to come together and try to make supply chains resilient, more resilient. And therefore, I think the G20 is maybe a very good format where we somehow feel and can develop ways and means to make this resilience stronger. And I think that's one of the items that should be thoroughly and constructively debated during the next 12 months.
Right, so you expect a strong debate on strong and resilient supply chains as well. Ambassador Vincenzo, from Italy's experience of the G20, how difficult would it be to come to a consensus on some of the very critical issues that we face today, including the indebtedness of countries?
Yes, thank you so much. First of all, let me express really a great appreciation for the role played by India in Bali in helping in finding a consensus or a majority consensus on the leaders' declaration. And I hope this is a good step towards a successful Indian presidency. In our experience, we focus on some of the global issues, like the fight against pandemic, the security in food and agricultural supply, and also in the finance for climate. We start some mechanisms that we hope can be implemented and also have further achievement during the G20 Indian presidency.
Right. Usha Manori, in terms of the UNDP's approach to the G20, you have been here having meetings at the Niti Aayog with different stakeholders. What would you like to apprise the world about at the G20?
I think, well, first of all, I've had a very productive set of meetings in the 3 days that I've been here. And, you know, we consider ourselves at UNDP to be a key partner of the government. And what we hope and what we see the government doing is putting in place an SDG action plan, which is exactly what is needed to move to the next level. There's a lot of discussion that has taken place on what has to be done and what could be done, but what India is trying to do in its leadership of the G20 is put in place an action plan and models and ways forward that should take us through to achieving Agenda 2030.
Right. Ambassador Astuto, coming to you at this point, there was a lot of tension over the Russia-Ukraine war, its impact, how to bring Russia to book during the G20 in Bali as well over the last couple of months. How do you think these issues are going to spill over to the India presidency of the G20?
Well, look, Russia's aggression, Russia's unprovoked and unjustified aggression against a neighbor is a clear violation of international law and of the UN Charter. And we also see in liberated zones, in areas liberated from the Russian occupation, mounting evidence of horrific war crimes. And as we speak, we assist to the bombing of civilian infrastructure, particularly energy infrastructure, with a clear objective to make the population suffer. In the meantime, Russia has also weaponized energy prices and food prices. It's a deliberate policy which puts at risk energy and food safety, particularly in the most vulnerable countries in the south of the world. So this is to say that clearly this is not a business as usual. We need to seek accountability for Russia's aggression, and we cannot let this aggression go scot-free. It's important that Russia is made accountable, and President Putin is convinced he needs to stop hostilities and withdraw. And here we are talking about the general interest of the international community.
Right. Ambassador Philipp, to speak to you about Germany's role when it comes to depoliticization of supply chain, also to end weaponization of trade and crucial linkages when it comes to fertilizers, energy, fuel, and food. What would Germany's message be at the G20, and what would you hope that India would do on that front?
So we have seen, as you rightly say, that the Russians have made international trade a tool, a political tool. We have seen their policy towards grain exports or fertilizer exports becoming somehow hostage to this conflict. And what we should do at any price is, I think, find solutions that trade routes and chains are re-established and not interrupted anymore. We would need a resilience and a reliability when it comes to transport of goods that are urgently needed in many parts of the world. We are very happy about that UN-Turkey negotiated agreement on grain transports, but I think that can only be the beginning. What we need at the end of the day is a reliable framework where goods can be transported to the places where they are urgently needed. And that is one of the very, very negative impacts this terrible crisis has on the world, not only on Europe, but on the world. And we should see to it that this will stop.
Right. Usha Manori, when it comes to climate finance, when it comes to SDGs, even the Indian government has been saying that sustainable development goals of different countries have lost momentum, and there is a need to resuscitate the focus on sustainability and climate action. What progress would you expect from India's presidency of the G20?
I think there has to be some collective thinking around financing the SDGs. I wouldn't say that SDGs have taken a or any such thing, but I do believe that we have to look at finance a little differently. In that sense, I think it's not just a question of Asian finance, it's also adaptation finance, and the last COP spoke to this. If you look at SDGs as a whole, one of the things the UN system is looking at is the stimulus plan, where we're saying there has to be an intentional and collective look at dedicating a certain percentage of GDP resources towards achieving the SDGs by 2030. And I think if that intentionality is not there, and if there's not a coming together of the various sources of finance, then that would put us in a place where we may not achieve the SDGs.
Right. We are going to take a short break at this point, but don't go anywhere. We will also discuss developments at COP27, how this will spill over to the G20, what kind of conversation we need on loss and damage finance, climate finance at the G20. Don't go anywhere. That's coming up.